talk about on this Naji Talk, including our deep dive into Sami Whitcomb. Sami moving on from Seattle, but how will the Storm replace Sami Whitcomb, the Australian Olympian? We'll get into that and much more on today's episode of Naji Talk.
You have three people who are selfless like that, three people who are dangerously disciplined like that, and you have a coach that also embodies all of those characteristics. You can expect good basketball.
I love interacting with the fans. I'm excited for them to cheer for us because it's hell when you come here. I even welcome people that could be skeptical because it's new.
There's going to be a standard of excellence and discipline in everything that we do.
The Pacific Northwest, this area, how passionate they are. It's culture everywhere, but it's great culture here. That's what I want to be a part of, to compete for a championship. That's everybody's goal. And I think it's just how we go about things and habits that we create. I want to be around winners that'll help us get closer to that.
And that's what the fans can expect. And we're going to have some fun.
All right, women's basketball fans, welcome to another episode of Tempestade Talk. Tempestade, of course, is the Portuguese word for storm. This episode and this podcast, I should say, brought to you by Black Rosie Media, Erica L. Ayala, alongside Roberta Rodrigues. How are you?
I'm good. I've been very busy. You can see that I'm not in my regular setup. My hair's a little messy, but all for good reasons. New job, a lot of WNBA free agency going on. Plus, more women's basketball news. It's been very busy, but I'm very happy to be here. How about you, Erica?
Yeah, unfortunately, I'm one of the many people in North America that has been a little bit under the weather. So just taking it day by day, but excited to get into this episode. So we're actually going to do a shoot around. Usually we only reserve the shoot around when there's big news, and there's plenty of news when it comes to the Seattle Storm, including a bit of news that you were able to break, Roberta, and Jordon Horston. Seems like she may have a long-term injury.
Yeah, it was just so unfortunate. It was during an Athletes Unlimited game. For those who don't know, Athletes Unlimited, we talked about it last week. It's another off-season domestic league that keeps American players here. It came before Unrivaled, and it's just so cool that now players have like two different options. Jordon was playing there. There was a game this last Friday, and she had I think a collision on court. I wasn't watching that game, but she hurt her knee during that game. It went kind of like very quiet for a while, and everyone was like wondering what was happening, because usually teams at least put out a statement, players being evaluated and going through an MRI, but there was like, it was crickets. So I talked to a few sources, and her agent was like, she has an ACL injury. Other people, I did talk to other people at the time. It was told to me that she would need surgery, but I didn't feel comfortable sharing that yet, because we know that medical cases can just change. But she had an ACL injury. The Storm sent out an injury update today, saying that it was on I think her right knee, and she will be out for the season. For those of you watching here, last week our episode was a deep dive on Jordon Horston, and we talked so much about how this year could be her big chance of making her name on the Storm, making her name in this league. So it's just very unfortunate news, very sad. When we cover a team, it's impossible not to, appreciate certain players. And I had the honor of working with Jordan Hart. I mean, not directly with her, but at the Storm. She was drafted when I worked at the Storm, and she was always just so kind. She got there so excited to learn, respecting everyone. And she is always so kind to the media. She one of the smartest people in basketball. I'm sure that she's going to be she's gonna go through this injury like a champ. She has people with her. She has a loving support system. Yes, Leslie Jones. I'm crushed that the Storm's not gonna have Jordon this season, especially for the reasons that they are. But yeah, Jordon Horston is injured, and the Storm said today that she is out for the season. That makes 2 severely injured players for the Storm.
Yeah, and I mean, obviously, like you said, we talked about Jordon Horston, but quickly, because we'll get into some of the free agent moves after we talk about Sami Whitcomb. But you mentioned 2 players are injured. So how do you see both these injuries now impacting? Like, break down how you see them impacting the Seattle Storm moving forward.
It's a big impact because, the Storm now has had some time to, plan around not having Nika, because she did get injured right in the beginning of the free agency. Sorry, not free agency, the offseason in Turkey. So that's a planning factor that has been going on for a little longer. Jordon was completely, of course, every injury is unexpected, but hers was so close towards, the middle of the free agency. I mean, it's been 12 days. I feel like the free agency has been going on for like months because of all of the movements that have been happening. So I think that I believe that the Storm can suspend them. They might be able to suspend their contract for the season and go after other people to relieve that. We did see Erica Wheeler signing with them today, so that could be that's a really good bench option once they're not going to have Nika. She's going to be a great reserve for Skylar Dickey-Smith. So the Star front office has a lot of work to do.
Yeah, and again, we'll get into those free agency moves, but we want to do our deep dive into Sami Whitcomb. The writing was pretty much on the wall. We have talked about this, not in any detail, but that's what today's episode is all about. We've talked about how Sami's exit interviews, and we'll play a little bit from that. It didn't seem like Sami was going to return. So let's talk about a little bit of what Sami Whitcomb did. Specifically this year for the Seattle Storm, and why maybe she or the Storm wanted to move on. So what did Sami Whitcomb do this season, and why would the Storm want to move on?
Oh, I thought you were going to play the video. I'm sorry. Yeah, so Sami was not as used this season. She was a solid reserve for the team. Pulling up her stats here right now, and you saw that she did have one of the lowest minute percentage for her season. That was 15.3, which is a big difference from 2023. That was 24.5. And I gotta say, from watching Sami play, you could tell that she was not there was something there that there wasn't a motivating factor, I would say. And that's not to say that she was lazy or anything. It's just, it seemed like an off year. And when she in the exit interview, what she said is that she said, I know my place in this league. I know my role in this league, because someone asked if she would be looking to go to a team where she could be a starter. And she was very, she seemed very self-aware, which was that she's not a starter in
Yeah, and
this
we'll get into
league.
that. We'll hear from Sami, but let's talk just about what she did in in 2024 before we dive deep into that, because we'll hear from Sami. But as you mentioned, her points per game, it's the third lowest, third lowest minutes per game. Also, her third lowest, or among her lowest points per game average. As a matter of fact, all of her lowest three have come with Seattle. 15.3 minutes game in 2024, and then you'd have to go back to her first two seasons, 8.6 points or minutes, in 2018, 12.2 minutes per game in 2017. She scored 4.5 points in 2017, 2.9 in 2018, and 5 points in 2024. The field goal percentage also down, not her lowest of her career, it was, but not by a lot. But her lowest field goal percentage at 34.6, and was shooting at a 29.2% clip from the 3-point line, which absolutely was the lowest in her career. So you talked about things being a little bit off. She was effectively a little bit of a glue player at times, Sami Whitcomb. We talked before that she was, did not play in some of the postseason games. So let's hear from Sami, or we'll first hear a little bit about, what she made of her role with the Seattle Storm this past season.
Consistency's probably always been, as a bench player, struggle, or what I'm trying to do. And I think part of that is because as a bench player, your role does change game to game. I got basically DNP'd both playoff games, but I was starting just before that for 3 games. Throughout the course of the season, it's fluctuated. So I think, I'm always trying to be whatever they need me to be. And I think this year in particular, because it was a new group, a lot of new pieces, trying different things, doing different things. It just took a bit of working through that.
So that's Sami Whitcomb, and we're going to hear from her again in a little bit here. But I mean, again, Sami just saying, she alluded to that this was a team, where there are a lot of different pieces trying to throw spaghetti up on the wall effectively. And Sami Whitcomb was one of the players that seemed impacted by this. We'll talk about another one on our next episode, Mercedes Russell, who also will not return to the Seattle Storm. But, it was a combination of a down year for Whitcomb. And obviously, we talked about this before throughout the season and throughout our offseason coverage. The Seattle Storm, even though they were playing better and winning more games than they did the prior season, the results, or I suppose the ends, did not seem to justify the means, being that the process for this year's Seattle Storm team seemed to really impact a lot of different players, Sami Whitcomb being one of them.
Yeah, and we've talked extensively about that in this podcast, how the Storm was struggling to find their identity this season, and Noelle Quinn was experimenting with different lineups, with different options on the court, because it was a completely different team from anything this team has ever seen. So it took a lot of, trial and error. Noe said that this team could get to the finals. I think I didn't see that team getting to the finals. It was not realistic in my point of view, because it's a very new team. It's a completely new team, and we're not talking about players who are on their prime. We're talking about extremely good players who are above average. But when we're talking about the New York Liberty, the Las Vegas Aces, the Minnesota Lynx, we're talking about teams that have players who are also above the average, but they're on their prime. I think that for the Storm, they would have had to figure out things a little quicker. Now, knowing what happened behind the scenes, knowing everything that was going on, it makes more sense how things turned out. But I think that it definitely impacted Sami. We talked about how it impacted Ezzy, Jordon, because they were those players who came who were like they were other options of play. We knew that it was the main options were Skylar, NECA, and Jewel. So figuring out how to play this team around those three players was a process, and there's gonna be an even bigger process this season probably.
I mean, I hear what you're saying, and again, on Gotta Get Up, a podcast for New York Liberty fans, we talked a lot about how chemistry does take some time. That being said, I think the summary is a little bit, it doesn't hold the players accountable like Skylar Diggins-Smith did. The fact of the matter is, I agree with, and I've said this before, I do not agree with what Noe said. This is not a finals team. They were not a finals team, and that is because of how they played during certain stretches of time. They were best when they were in transition, but they weren't always playing their transition game. If you take the last regular season game they played in Seattle, that was against Vegas, who we knew at that time it was highly likely, whether that game was going to be in Vegas or Seattle, that they were going to see each other in the first round. The Seattle Storm had a chance to really get a vice grip on that game, and they didn't. Those are inconsistencies. So yes, inconsistencies do come from having new players. But again, the Seattle Storm, in theory, had what the New York Liberty didn't have in 2023, and that is that there were three solid, surefire options. The problem, air quotes, with the New York Liberty is that maybe they had too many options, but everyone knew that the ball should be facilitated through Skylar Diggins-Smith, Nneka Ogwumike, and Jewel Lloyd. But when Nneka of the three was by far the most consistent, then you do need other players to step up. That's 3 of 5 starters, but it's up to a 12-player roster. So similarly to what happened with the New York Liberty, I don't think that, or I should say similarly to the New York Liberty, that means that you need other players to step up. I think where the New York Liberty and the Seattle Storm separate a little is that we knew that Sandy Brondello was playing a short bench because she wanted to integrate her starting 5 because they were new. In Seattle, the short bench seemed like more of a punishment than a process.
It's all about intentionality, right? There was a plan for the short bench in New York. In Seattle, it was... again, a consequence. And we have also talked, I mean, if you know basketball, you know that you need depth to win championships, and you need depth to beat the contenders. And that's something that the Storm was lacking at. You had reserves who would come in, give some energy, but that was not consistent, unfortunately. And that's why I think the next moves that the Storm makes in free agency are going to dictate how they're going to do this season. Because let's be honest, there is a very good starting 5 coming up there. We don't know who's going to be the 2 yet, but with AC coming, that's already, a big deal with AC and with the second round pick. But last year, that was not a thing.
Yeah, and I mean, we'll get to that again. We'll get to that. I don't want to get too much into that, but I think this is a good question from Moni. Who gets those minutes when the bench is ineffective? And so Sami Whitcomb in that clip talks about, I mean, and I didn't play the full clip, but she talks about that she's been an inconsistent bench player. Then she goes on to say, as we'll hear in the clip that I'm going to play. Actually, let me play the clip. I want you to hear what she says about, you alluded to it, what she says about what she's looking for. But for me, there's also a lot there's some things that are just even inconsistent with some of how, not just Sami Whitcomb. We just happen to be talking about Sami Whitcomb, but there just wasn't enough. This was not a team that had the mentality of a team that could reach the finals when it's all said and done. And, who gets the minutes, who's responsible for that. Ultimately, players, individuals have to be responsible for themselves. And if we're being honest, coaches get paid to manage teams. And sometimes that comes with managing feelings. But again, we can talk about that. Here's what Sami had to say regarding what her next move is. Of course, we already know what that is, but I just wanted we'll take you back to 24 hours after the Seattle Storm was eliminated by the aforementioned Las Vegas Aces in the first round of the playoffs.
I'm never looking to be a starter in this league. Obviously, I believe in myself and I back myself to be in any role, but that's not something that's, on my agenda of things that I require when I'm talking to a team. But I do think, role. What role do you have? What in my position? What kind of players do you have ahead of me? How many? All of those things. I think, how does the coaching staff view me? In terms of their need, their fit, all of those things. I think all those things come into play. Obviously, I have a family, so that stuff comes into play. The city, how the organization is run, all of those types of things really matter. But I think largely it'll just be about, if I'm going to bring my family over and uproot them and we're going to do this, a big part of it is that it's worthwhile for us. It's worthwhile for me. I feel like it's something that's still fulfilling me in terms of my love and joy of the game. Those types of questions will definitely be asked of any team that is interested, if they are, and I'll just kind of take it from there.
So that's what Sami Whitcomb said she was looking for in free agency. We ultimately know that she signed with Phoenix. Before we get into that, though, I want to talk about perhaps the role and maybe if or how it differs between Sami Whitcomb in the WNBA and Sami Whitcomb for Team Australia. Now, we can definitely say, and we talked about this on the Ezzy episode and throughout the Paris Olympics while I was in France, but Australia did not start out the gate very well, and they had some shoddy games. That being said, we see that Sami Whitcomb, 13, and now granted, if you get to a medal game, that's 7 total games. So this is a very small sample size, but 13 points per game and 5.3 assists per game for Sami Whitcomb for the Opals. What is the difference? Also 3.5 rebounds, but her assists particular 7th overall. What is the difference between Sami Whitcomb in the WNBA and Sami Whitcomb for Team Australia? You're on mute.
I am so sorry. It's tied to what she said in this exit interview, right? She said that she knows her role in the WNBA. Her role is reserve. And with Australia, her role is like the anchor. She is the person that the team looks up to, and she is the person who drives the team. We saw Ezzy take over, but Sami was really the person who was taking the realm and making sure that the team kept going. So it's a contrast, and that we also see that in Australia and the WNBL with Bendigo Fire, where she plays. She is a key player. She is a role player, which is completely different from here in Australia. That's also very common with international players, but that's a conversation for another day. So this contrast, that she might see how she can contribute on the court if she's given the opportunity, and she didn't see that happening here in Seattle. So in Phoenix, she probably believes that that's where she's going to get that. I was trying to find her connections to Phoenix. I see.
Yeah, and we'll get to Phoenix in a minute. I want to stay with the Olympics, Sami versus in Australia versus the W, because I think we need to really sort and sift that out before we can figure out what makes her or how she fits into Phoenix. But I think what you said regarding role plays, especially players who happen to play for federations outside of effectively the United States. I was going to say North America, but we Canada's anyway, that's a whole nother Canada's got a lot of work to do on the basketball, men's and women's side. And no Natalie Achonwa, which is going to be really tough. But,
Yeah.
I think what you're saying makes sense. And what I think is a little bit difficult in this equation for me with regard to Sami Whitcomb is that she has been a part of championship culture in Seattle. She's been a part of Olympic culture with Australia. And that's why this question that Moni has posed, I think there are layers to this, or at least when I see it, it's not just this question, which is who gets those minutes when the bench isn't effective. For me, the question, Moni, if I can remix this, is also who among the reserves is responsible for getting the bench in line. And Sami Whitcomb would appear to be a prime candidate. And that just didn't seem to work out for Seattle this past season.
And it's very different from what we have seen from Sami in previous years, right? Because
Exactly.
she has been a key player, an identity player for this franchise. She's a fan favorite. She helped them win 2 championships. She has been on this team. She knows how they operate, and she used to have control of the bench. But that's not what happened this season. And then when we look back, going back to her stats, right? When we were seeing she came back to Seattle in 2023, which was a completely different year for the team. It was the first post Sue and Stewie season, with Jewel being the main player. And then we have 2024, which was this season. I think that, and by hearing what Sami says, by understanding a little bit of her work mentality, I think that she wants to have a more structured role, and that was not happening here in Seattle because we were talking about the identity part of it, because there was so much experimentation going on. I think that had an impact on her. She has different priorities now. So in my opinion, that's what happened. I feel like the system was not, it's not that she wasn't fitting this. It's not that she wasn't fitting the system. The system was not fitting her. That's not the system she was willing to operate.
Yeah, and again, you and I have disagreed because I don't think that Noe is a top 3 coach yet. I just don't. And maybe some of what you're talking about is part of the reason why you could make a case saying that she's just not quite there yet. Not when you have Cheryl Reeve, not when you have Sandy Brondello. I mean, Becky Hammond has been a fantastic coach for the most part, but all of those coaches are able to own their reserve and how they utilize them. A lot of times that comes from underutilizing the bench for the sake of getting your starting 5 in alignment. But when that's also not happening in Seattle, I mean, Sami agreed with what Skylar Diggins-Smith said. If you don't show up, you're going to get beat. She was in that press conference with Sky and talked about it after the fact as well. For me, and I hear what you're saying, Sami maybe wanted to play a different role. And I think a few players on Seattle felt that way. That being said, at some point in time, if you're not going to get traded within a season, I do think there's a responsibility to lean into what is, if only to get yourself a favorable contract when you get out. And for me, I think that some players for Seattle fell short of that. Not necessarily Sami. I saw Moni say Sami played really well. It's just that her shot wasn't falling. I do think she had to lean into things on the defensive side a little bit more. I mean, we went over her numbers. The shot definitely was not falling. Some of her worst shooting percentages of her career. But again, it's just like overall, this team did not have the fight that matched what the roster had the potential to be, nor at times what they kind of fell into. I think the Seattle Storm, we talked about this before All-Star / Olympic break. This team, had they made a concerted effort and a push, they could have gotten home court for the playoffs. They were in position to do that. And then they come back after that break, and it's like they're putting the training wheels back on. And that's a setback, especially because at that time, the Vegas Aces were starting to figure it out after a really bad start. So, I mean, just some things to consider. I do think that Sami fell victim to some of that. I think there are other players that we'll have to talk about. And, I think there was a lot of people that were discontent. And I think that it's a fool's errand. This is my overall thoughts before we move on. It's a fool's errand with this 2024 Seattle team to place one person or one thing as the problem, air quotes for those listening on audio when we repost this on audio. But there were multiple problems, and there wasn't enough people stepping up to ameliorate what some of the cascading or compounding problems were. And that's a lack of accountability. And maybe I'm being a little tough on a Seattle team because I also cover the Seattle Kraken, who's having a similar problem right now. So that's probably why I'm a little bit like, at the end of the day, you can say that coaching isn't where you want it to be. You can say the front office hasn't moved on from Stewie and Sue Bird, and all of those things might be true. But what's also true is you have a job. You have a job to do, and you got to figure out a way to do it. I mean, that's what it is to be a professional.
Yeah, and going back to what we have been saying also, all of that changing process, the identity process, this happens when we are, transitioning from one phase to another. I don't want to get philosophical or anything, but I do feel like the Storm, this year, 2024, is going to be the first time that it is Noelle Quinn's team. That's the first time that this is going to be her team. Before that, it was Sue Bird and Stewie's team. Then it was Jewel Lloyd's team. This year, it's going to be Noelle Quinn's team, and that's when we're going to have to know what her full we're going to be able to have a better assessment of how she's on the realm.
I'm not sure I agree with you. I have to think about that. But what I will say is, if it is true, that's also problematic. It should always be the head coach's team, period. So you have your star player, but to say that this is the first year that Noelle Quinn can impart her will, that also is a problem that the Seattle organization has to figure out. But we can get into that because, again, I think the accountability got lost in the sauce with the Seattle Storm. I think Sami Whitcomb was a fringe player. There were times where she stepped up. There were other times where she didn't, if we're being honest. So what does that mean for her as she moves on to Phoenix? But specifically for the purposes of Tempestagi talk, how do you, quote unquote, replace Sami Whitcomb? I think it's not a like for like. There's been so much movement. So we'll talk about all of that. Want to let y'all know, though, that Black Rosie Media has not one, but two newsletters, and they're both steaming up. We have the Women's Basketball Roundup, or sometimes we shorten it to just be WBB, and so many acronyms, WBB Roundup. And that comes out Tuesday. We're actually moving to a Tuesday, Thursday. So you're going to get Unrivaled and Athlete Unlimited, stats, leaderboards. Of course, we have the one-on-one tournament that will be commencing again later in the week for Unrivaled. Athletes Unlimited, no Jordon Horston, but former Seattle Storm player Kier Nurse is there. If you listen to our other podcast, Got to Get Up, Jalen Sherrod from the New York Liberty there. Lots to talk about. And our newsletters, the other newsletter I should say, is our Gold Medal Dispatch. It started as a pop-up newsletter for just our Olympic coverage. But now, as we gear up for the Winter Olympics, we are going to have some more original content, but it won't just be Winter Olympics up to 2026. Also have some archives, including a really fantastic conversation with Ari Chambers that we will run as part of the Gold Medal Dispatch. So all of our newsletters are run and powered by Beehive. And did you know that your free subscription either to the WBB Roundup, curated by Brian Florenton, or the Gold Medal Dispatch, curated by me, comes with a free mobile app? That's right. You can get a mobile app right on your smartphone. Anytime we post for one of the newsletters, you will get the updates right there. And finally, whether it's our Beehive links, we've also been sponsored by the Locked On NBA network, specifically their newsletters. I also am a Locked On host myself on the NHL side, but make sure you check out our sponsors. That's how we make the newsletter free to you, but it's also a way to monetize Black Rosie Media. So if you're not already subscribed, you can check out the links that we will provide, especially if you're watching on YouTube after the fact. We're live right now. Hello to all of our watchers who are with us live. And if you're listening on audio, you can also check the show notes because we will have those links. But that is a surefire way for you to support Black Rosie Media so we can continue with Tempestagi Talk and all of the other things that we do. All right, Roberta, we talked and alluded to some things, but now I want to talk about some of the free agent moves in relation to Sami Whitcomb. So we talked about it. An off year for Sami. We talked about that. It was an off year for Jewel. So just some pieces not falling. The shots are not going to fall, but it seemed like maybe the shots not falling had a little bit to do. Certainly, it seems that was the case with Jewel, and maybe a little bit with Sami Whitcomb, that maybe some of the other things happening with the club impacted, maybe more than they would have liked, but they definitely impacted performance. So you're shaking that off, but what does that look like? You mentioned Erica Wheeler before, and in as much as Erica Wheeler is a backcourt player who also is playing off of the bench, sure, I guess you can say that's a replacement for Sami Whitcomb, but I really don't see those two players as like for like.
No, definitely not. And I would say that this season's Achilles heel for the Storm is the number 2 position, because they don't have a number 2 starter and they don't have a number 2 reserve. And that's good. They need to sort that. Of course, we know that in the draft, they may pick up Olivia Miles, who would be a good addition. I'll be honest, I've seen the possibility of Skylar and Olivia Miles playing together would be just a cool storyline. But they need to figure it out, because Erica Wheeler is a reserve for Skylar Diggins-Smith. She's a true point guard. She's a true one, and that's where she will excel. She's a veteran point guard, which is something that the Storm needs. She has been around this league for a long time. She's an all-star. So she's a reserve for Skylar on the 1 position. There isn't a replacement for Sami yet. And I don't know if we're getting into that right now, but I was taking a look into the free agents who are still available, and that's not going to be an easy position to fill. It's not going to be an easy one.
Yeah. Also, I don't really know that you need 2 veterans at the 1.
I know. I was thinking
that
about
doesn't
that.
make any sense to me, to be honest. Now, how much of this is because Nika is out? I think if you wanted to say where does Erica fit in comparative to 2024, I think it's really more for Nika. And we haven't done our Nika episode. Yeah. It'll come after Mercedes Russell, who's our next episode deep dive. But I think Erica Wheeler is not a quote unquote Sami Whitcomb, replacement. If anything, he's insurance because you do not have Nika, to your point, if she's the Skylar Diggins-Smith backup. So let's just, for a little bit before we go back into the Seattle Storm, so does Sami fit in Phoenix? Now, granted, Phoenix has made a lot of moves. They don't look anything like what they looked like even just a few weeks ago, but we do know they don't have Tosh Cloud anymore, just as one example. Really heartbreaking. We talked about that in our Slack community a lot. But Sami, I think they also don't have Rebecca Allen as like a stretch she's a 3, maybe stretch 2, anywhere from 2 to 4, but she's a proper 3, I think, Rebecca Allen, small forward, if I had to, but they don't have Beck Allen, no Tosh Cloud, no Brittany Griner. They do pick up Satu Sabali. They also pick up Alyssa Thomas. But so
Mhm.
where is Sammy in this equation? Also knows Sophie Cunningham for Phoenix.
Yeah. I mean, Phoenix is another team that has a lot to figure out when you look at and their roster. So let me ask you, Erica, do you consider Ka a 2 or a 3?
A 3?
Mm,
I don't consider her a 3 at all. I don't think that's
yeah,
on the table. I think she's a 1 or a 2, and she's probably a 2, but she's not a true anything, but she's not a 3. I
yeah.
don't think she's a 3 at all.
I don't think she's a 3 either. I think that she could help stretch if the team needed. It will put her in a not the best position for her. So from the current configuration of this team, Sammy would continue reserve, and she would probably be a backup for Ka.
They have
That
7 guards on their roster right now.
yeah,
That's
yeah.
insane, Phoenix. Like, what are
We're
y'all
talking
doing?
about yeah, we're talking about, a veteran guard who can bring those points from the bench. Sammy is the most obvious choice to back in that sense. So I think that's where they're going, and that's going to be her main role for this season. It's a good, the main pieces are good, but they need to work on their depth the same way that the Storm does. It's going. I gotta say, I think there's like a question mark on what the Phoenix Mercury is going to be like this year, because you have really good players,
Who's
but
their center? Do they even
ex-
Kalani Brown, okay.
yeah. So, which makes sense, leaving Dallas, because there were 2 centers there. Um, so I think that her role is going to be similar to what it was with the Storm. But it does seem like Phoenix is all over the place. I'm gonna say
Yeah,
that.
I mean, and we'll see some of these players obviously have to go through training camp. There are more moves to be made, but yeah, I don't really understand. But I've talked about that on Gotta Get Up, a podcast for New York Liberty fans. Okay, we talked a little bit about Wheeler with no Sammy Whitcomb. Again, you mentioned AC Alicia Clark. NECA is expected to return. It's been announced by her sister that she will, but I don't think as of right
It
now
has.
it has
It
been.
has.
I can't keep up with.
Yeah.
No, I meant the Seattle Storm have announced her.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
I don't.
It was NECA, AC, Gabby, like almost on a 4-day span.
Got it. Okay. Well, there you
Very
go.
fast.
So I've also been sick, so who knows? Okay,
Yeah.
so Alicia Clark, NECA announced officially. Gabby announced officially.
Woo woo.
What does I think AC is a huge get. I
Yeah.
love that get.
Me too. Me too. Uh-huh.
I mean, I don't know if it was in the works before Jordon went down. Oh yeah, Money says official. Okay, yeah. I don't know if it was already in the works or before Jordon went down. Again, the announcements kind of have been coming all in a cluster here. I mean, if Jordon, I'll just put it out there. If Jordon was healthy, what role does Jordon play when you have AC and Gabby?
She would either have to adapt for to be more of a 4, and then she would be a backup for Ezzy. But now that I see her being that depth that the Storm
Who's
needs,
her?
because
You mean
Jordan,
AC?
Jordan,
Well,
Jordan.
Jordan's not playing, so
No, I'm saying because Jordan is not playing,
yeah.
but she's young. So I think
Oh,
that
you mean
she would
like
still be
young?
primed. Yeah, I think she would still be primed. Without Jordan, AC is going to be, I don't see AC being a starter. I think she would be a backup for Gabby, and that's a really good backup that the Storm would have.
Yeah, you don't lose any defense. Arguably,
Yeah,
even maybe gain some. I mean, Gabby's a really good defender, but AC's
yeah. AC, she was a defensive player of the year before, right?
she's been at least
Yeah.
and should have won that one year, but
Yeah, that's true.
Candace Parker
Yeah.
took a charge and told everyone she should win, so she did.
Exactly.
Yes, I'm still
Yeah.
bitter. I don't care. I don't mess around with Defensive Player of the Year. I take that award very serious. But anyway, I digress. Congratulations, though, to all former and future Defensive Players of the Year. Like, I'm just salty. Like, and don't even get me started on when Tina Charles lost MVP to NECA.
Oh
But
my God.
anyway, that was wild. That was wild because hashtag efficiency. But again, anyway, I have thoughts on awards. Anyway, okay, so NECA, we've talked about it. We did our NECA episode. We knew that this was going to be huge. She was an integral piece. But now with Gabby Williams, with AC, now there are other players here that I think, I mean, and I didn't even mention Sky. Hootie hoo! If you're not watching Sky in Unrivaled, I don't know. You got to get your life because she's lighting it up.
Oh my God.
Skylar Diggins-Smith is looking amazing in Unrivaled. Her shot has looked fantastic.
That Enrique versus Sky. Oof.
I mean, I haven't been able to watch the 1v1. I've been doing adult things like taking accounting classes and bookkeeping classes. So that's, unfortunate for me, but I'll have to catch up over the weekend. But here's the thing. If Sky's shot that we're seeing in Unrivaled can convert, I think that maybe the Wheeler move makes more sense to me because of the two. If you can't find what you need, and I would not bank on the Seattle Storm getting a starting 5 ready 2 in the draft. Olivia Miles is a fantastic player, a little bit injury prone, and I think her game is exciting and electric to watch in the NCAA. There's a lot of refinement that will have to come in the WNBA. I think she'll be able to do it, but to put her in that 2 as a starter with a team that's trying to get back to that top 5, really top 4, I think that's a lot. I think maybe what you can do is you find a rotation where you can have Sky slot into that 2 and have Wheeler on the ball.
I think, if we're talking about the 2 position, I think the perfect solution, and I know that brings lots of feelings to many people and probably to you too, Erica, Kendrick Carter. I mean, put her in that 2 position where Jewel was playing. She would bring the points. She is faster than Jewel. I think she's a little more aggressive with her play style, and I say I'm not saying aggressive as in like in a mean way. I say aggressive as in like she pushes forward. I think that she would be a really good solution for what's happening with the 2 spot, and she would be a starter, which I think is something that she wants.
I mean, I don't hate it. I also don't love it. I don't think it's an obvious choice. I think that if the greater Seattle area had quote unquote issues with Sky, what chance does Kennedy even have? And that's just from a reputation. I'm not saying I agree with it, but at some point you got to call a spade a spade. Both of them come with some reputation. I don't think it's completely warranted. And here's the thing about Sky. She's grown. And she's going to handle her business. Kennedy's got some growing up to do. And I think that she's taken leaps and bounds. We saw what Teresa Weatherspoon could do. But it goes back to me for Noelle Quinn has some learning to do when it comes to being able to be a true masterful double Dutch style coach where you know when to press the buttons of your team and when to let them cook. And Kennedy at this point in time and Sky to an extent, they require that. I think that it's worth noting that that could be something that is very electric, but also I want to make sure I pick my words carefully because we're still talking about human beings here, but it's very electric.
Yes.
The passion and the energy that you would get some great downhill play from Kennedy Carter, which the Storm desperately need. And you would need to make sure that you have a strong, airtight, infallible, rock solid. Words are hard.
Words are hard.
I'll look it up later, unless someone wants to put what the actual word is in the chat for me, which I would appreciate. Rock solid culture. You'd have to have unwavering, rock solid culture that Carter can lean into and drive. So I think that's now this I like better because you still get downhill, you still get a shot. So Skylar and Courtney Williams, a teammate match made in heaven. That to me is a better match. I think Kennedy, it's maybe trying to force fit something, whereas Courtney Williams, I think, is a better ready-made fit.
I think all of that is valid. And of course, like we're talking, it's like we're supposing, creating a potential scenario.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. Thank you.
So, and then there's, perhaps someone who, and we're talking about reports, someone who has similar way of thinking and being would be what would feed Kennedy Carter and Skylar Diggins-Smith off of each other, the same way that Teresa Weatherspoon was so good for her. So when I look back at all of the teams, again, there is accountability. Skylar has been really good with taking accountability. Kennedy Carter has also taken a lot of accountability for, past incidents, things that happen. And when you look back into the teams that they have been part of, that all of the teams had, turmoils going on. When I wrote about Kennedy Carter, it was the year that Courtney Williams and another player had a fist fight, in a parking lot, and Courtney Williams was able to, come back up. So my opinion is that I think that Kennedy Carter could be a good fit to play with Skylar and under Noelle, because Noelle is doing so good with Skylar. She got Skylar's respect, and might be something that Kennedy Carter needs. I would love to. I would love to see Kennedy Carter.
I'm not sipping the Kool-Aid on that one. I don't think Noelle Quinn is the right coach for Kennedy Carter. I think she's the right coach for Skylar Diggins-Smith, because Skylar Diggins-Smith is of a different era. So those are my thoughts. Infallible. Yeah, I don't know why. It just didn't sound right. You know how you know something, but then you wonder if you actually know it. Anyway.
Yeah.
Thank you, Leslie. Infallible. I will make a
I think that kind of like to close my closing remarks on the Kennedy Carter thing. I think that the Storm was kind of a blank canvas. They had starting this season, because there's only Azzy left from their championship years. It's a whole new team, and the coaching staff can make their own decisions. So that's my thought. I think that the Storm is kind of a blank canvas, and they can set up a new game style, new game identity. That's how I see it.
Yeah, and that goes back to why I use the word infallible. Kennedy Carter, in my opinion, needs to go somewhere where there is already an infallible culture, not a developing one, but one that is already in existence. So Anyway, let's move on here to I feel like we kind of already talked about Athletes Unlimited and Unrivaled, but Skylar Diggins Smith and the Hootie Hoo Lunar Owls
Hootie hoo.
are undefeated, are absolutely crushing the game. I mean, Nafisa Collier is looking scary, just flat out
MVP.
scary, just flat out scary. So the one-on-one, we'll have more of this for the WBB roundup, but the one-on-one tournament, they had a few hiccups. Unrivaled never did a great job giving us details on how they would add to the roster in if and when there were any injuries. We know some players have other they have other engagements in the off season, such as a Sabrina Ionescu, and I think we're starting to see some of that. But anyway, so they had to remix everything. Right now, the final four standing, the aforementioned Nafisa Collier, Azare Stevens, I think a little bit surprising for some people, Aaliyah
She's
Edwards,
so underrated.
Arike Ogumbawale. I think Azare Stevens has also, this talent is there. I don't think she hasn't always been consistent. Some of that I think is injury related, but for me, Azare, I love that she's getting an opportunity to showcase her skill set. I think she's just, fallen on some interesting teams. But I don't know. Between these, Azare, Aaliyah, Nafisa, and Arike, who you got?
Can you remind me of the matchups?
Azare and Fee are going to go head to head, and Aaliyah versus Arike.
Okay, I think it's going to be Fee and Arike at the end. And I think that Arike is going to get the best, and she's going to be crowned champion. It's been fun. I got to say, some of these matchups are just like, some were boring to watch. Some were really exciting. I was going to say, I'm going to say that most of them were really good. Some of them were a little were just not. I think the Lexi Hall and Ray Burrell, the first one, I think was not really exciting. But there have been some really good ones. The
Ray played Katie Lou.
No, talking about Lexi Hall.
Oh.
The first Lexi Hall
she played Ryan Howard?
Yeah.
I don't know.
Yeah,
also, everything changed. I haven't watched any of it because I've been adulting, sadly. Lexi played Ryan. Okay, yeah.
Yeah. All of the Skylar games were really good. Courtney Williams, which was Courtney Williams was just like unbelievable playing the one-on-one tournament. It was so fun. She used defense to get going in that game. That's how she established herself, and then became dominant in her matchup. It was really good. The Skylar and Arike was so good in so many levels. When they got in, when they were announced, was guard from Notre Dame is Skylar Diggins Smith, and then a guard from Notre Dame, Arike. There was a big miss because from the announcer, he said is Arike O Diggins Smith. He said he called her Arike O Diggins Smith, and that was big fail. But the rest of it was good. That's so weird. I think he froze because he was afraid that he was not going to say her name right. But anyways, people picked up, and it was just I'm sure he felt pretty embarrassed. But yeah, it's the second round was really fun. I don't think there was one boring matchup in the second round.
His mic went out.
It was really weird because he said "oh," but then he said Skylar Diggins Smith. He said Diggins Smith. Of course, I don't know, Erica, if you were able to see.
No, I didn't watch not 1 second, so I have no idea.
The Brianna Stewart
Nope, didn't see it.
situation. She lost 12-0 for Edwards, Aaliyah Edwards. And people were being very harsh on Stewie. And people were like, oh, that's why NBA players don't do All-Star game. Stewie is a little off her game, I think that she took the off season to do other things, but her unrivaled performance doesn't say a lot about her history as a player. So it was 12-0. Some people got some really good memes out of it.
Yeah, I mean, everyone's gonna hate on Stewie for so many different reasons. I mean, we've talked about it on Gotta Get Up, and it came up briefly while I was in my accounting class in Slack, but I'm still convinced she hurt herself in the finals.
Yeah, me too.
So
it's very unusual Stewie. Like, for those of us who have been watching her since the college years, that's not the Stewie that we are used to.
Yep, I just am not. I hate it for the narratives. Because there was that ESPN article. No one thought New York should have won the championship. It's like, I don't know, cry about it.
Some people just want to hate. Some people just want to hate. That's it.
Like, and I'm a high level hater. I'm an elite level hater. And it's like I hate that Kelsey Plum said what she said after the 2023 finals. Like, I hate it.
Yeah.
But like, I don't have any beef personally with Kelsey Plum. I'll call her out for that very specific thing. If you want to call out Stewie for not playing well and Unrivaled, sure, go to town. But it's just some of the things that people say. I'm just like, all right.
Yeah, people like to create things. Like, it's it's not. We're talking about a two-time MVP, gold medalist. Like, I wouldn't dare saying anything about Stewie because of what she has already done in the league. Like, Stewie, Asia, they are untouchable, basically.
So, yep, I will have to catch up over the weekend. I'm traveling a little bit. I have a baby shower to go to, which is very exciting, but I will catch up. And of course, we will crown a champion. I was a little bit not surprised, but a little bit hurt that Leash didn't make it to the Final Four.
Me too.
We know she loves making some extra money. I think I said that in the Slack last night. So, but again, I didn't see how that went down, so I'll have to take a look at it again. But again, I think Unrivaled, we've been talking about it in Slack a lot, talking about it at Black Rosie Media a lot. This is really an opportunity to showcase skill sets at a different level. I mean, I will say Enrique one-on-one in a one-on-one tournament. Wait, hold on. Who is she playing again? I feel sorry for them. I really do. Because like that, this just seems like something Enrique was made for. Like, Aaliyah. Okay, she's playing Aaliyah Edwards, who's like Aaliyah. Like, she's been putting people on. Listen, Linda, listen. So before Mish became big time working with Sarah Spain every day, she of course would join us on Gotta Get Up, and we talked about it. Aaliyah Edwards would have gotten so much more shine if Washington won maybe like 3 extra games last year. She was solid for Washington. And her game, I think, evolved in a way that I don't know that I was completely expecting. I think it's always interesting to see the UConn players that just completely break out of their shell or whatever the regimented, and I think this is waning a little bit, but it used to be pretty regimented at UConn.
Yeah.
And then you see these players come into the W or play for their federation, and you're like, oh, I didn't know you got down like that. I feel like that's what we're seeing with Aaliyah Edwards.
Me too. I do think she carries that, like, Gino Auriemma, tough regiment. And I know that there was talk about how well the UConn alumni were doing so good in this one-on-one tournament.
Well, I think we're not seeing it. I don't credit UConn. I credit Aaliyah is what I'm saying. Like, I don't think that we're seeing UConn. I think the discipline that you get from UConn makes you a great pro over time. What I'm saying
Mhm.
is that Aaliyah is able to be her true self in a one-on-one basketball scenario that is outside of the mold of what UConn basketball
Yeah.
is. That's what I'm saying.
Yeah.
And that's why I think Unrivaled is a lot of fun for a player like Aaliyah. And I think we even saw
Yeah.
some of that in Washington. That's what I'm saying. Like, because UConn, I think, is starting to break away from that, but it was so
They
regimented
are.
for so long.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think Fee is another player. Not that Fee's out here, Fee is pretty low key Fee.
She is.
She's very calm, even toned for the most part, even when she's throwing shade, because she did throw some shade towards the New
She
York Liberty.
did. I
But when
love
she says
listen,
it, she
I
just says
love
it
that.
matter of factly. Like, there's not her voice doesn't raise. She's just like, yeah, I mean, they got the calls or whatever, so they're champions. But da, 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 da. I was like, okay, how many balls
Oh man.
be like? Don't get me started. But anyway, yeah, but
The press conference was amazing.
that's crazy. No,
The beer cinema.
first of all, like, don't even, like I said, don't even get me started. You want to talk about fouls? Let's talk about all those jump balls that, like, I ain't never seen that many jump balls in my life. In my life, cumulative, cumulative. She had all the dang jump balls.
Oh,
I can't understand. I can't understand. Anyway, I don't have no beef with Fee. I don't like how that went down, but that's, it is what it is. Athletes Unlimited. Okay, so we have new
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 teams.
captains. Yeah, we have new teams, new captains. So including Team Kia Nurse, Team
Mhm.
Kia Nurse, Team Harris, Team Zegrist, and Team Bradford. So for those who maybe don't know, Athletes Unlimited, their shtick is that you get points for wins, your team wins. You get points also for certain things like rebounds, steals, etc. So some points are team points, some points are individual points, and you can also be docked
Mhm.
points. So if you turn the ball over, if you miss a free throw. So when we talk about a leaderboard for
Yeah.
Athletes Unlimited, that is how they determine who the team captains will be for the next season. So, or excuse me, for the next week. So right now it's Maddie Zegrist leading the table, Ty Harris, Odyssey
Yeah.
Sims, and Crystal Bradford. But
Mhm.
Kia,
I like Bradford a lot.
yeah, Crystal Bradford has been pretty solid. Um, yeah, and so that's who's leading right now. But the captains coming into this week's play were Zegris Harris, Bradford, and Kia Nurse, who I think
Mhm.
is trying to bounce back. I think that injury was really a setback for Kia Nurse.
Yeah.
So we'll see how she's able to come back.
Yeah.
Lexi Brown was just recently on the Locked On Women's Basketball podcast talking a little bit about what to expect in LA. LA is a very interesting team. This is not a podcast for LA Sparks fans, so we're not going to get into that. But I'm curious to see. I mean, they have a new coach, so there's a lot
Yeah.
of change happening there. I'm curious to see how everything's going to come together. All right, we're going to close it up. A reminder that the fourth quarter is for YouTubers only. So if you are listening to our audio playback, this is where the episode will end. A reminder, make sure you subscribe to the Women's Basketball Roundup. Will come out Tuesdays, Thursdays episode, Thursdays digest, as I like to say, of the newsletter is going to
I
give
like
you
that.
the stats that you need to know for Athletes Unlimited and Unrivaled. For Unrivaled, of course, we'll be talking about the 1v1 tournament, but as well as who's leading in the stats, aka everything is fee. That's, I mean, too long didn't read.
Yep.
That's what it is. But we'll also
Yep.
get into NCAA because we want to make sure that we're separating those three things because we know they're going to peak. So AU and Unrivaled will take us directly into conference play, NCAA play. So we want to make sure we have those separate for you. If you missed Tuesday's edition, we talk about money moves. I don't watch football for very specific reasons that probably belong on another podcast. But if you really want to know, you can DM me in Slack and I will tell you all about why I don't watch football. But for people who do, they were very impressed with all of the WNBA players that were represented in the commercials. So that was kind of cool to hear after the fact,
Really
because I do
cool.
not watch the Super Bowl and never will. Anyway, I was glad to hear that after the fact. So Brian talks a little bit about that. We also do a deeper dive into free agency, including something that Brian and I talked about on the last episode of Gotta Get Up. But where does Indiana fit when it comes to true contenders? I'm just going to let y'all know, I have Indiana over Seattle as of right now. I'm sorry. I do. I do.
Oh,
I absolutely do. I think you have your top tier teams that have anyway, sorry, audio people, you have to make sure you check out the women's basketball roundup because all of that is in there. We're going to piece that out. Now, for those who are with us on YouTube, it is listener questions / comments. If there's anything that you want us to talk about, any questions that you have, now is the time. But yeah, hot take. I don't think it's so hot, but I have the teams, the top 3 teams that have earned the benefit of the doubt coming into this season: New York, Vegas, Minnesota. And I think Indiana has not earned the benefit of the doubt yet, but you have to think about how they ended 2024, that regular season surge after All-Star was bananas. They have their backcourt back together. They added DeWanna Bonner.
yeah, that's a big deal.
Come on. Come on.
You know, I don't know. I think that they're gonna do well. I think that Stephanie White is going to make a big difference on that team.
Massive.
And you see, because she has coached Dewanna Bonner. She has been doing a lot of work with Caitlin Clark. And of course, you have Leah Boston, Natasha Howard. I see the potential for like a top 5 team. I do see a potential for that. Perhaps a second round playoff team. Depending on who the Storm brings for the 2 position, I don't see them over the Storm.
Who makes them better? Who makes the Storm better than Indiana right now?
Skylar and Eka. I think that those 2 make a really big difference. Then we're talking about not experience also, because Aaliyah and Caitlin Clark are still young. I do think that the Indiana Fever is going to get a championship within the next 3 years. I do see that team getting a championship for sure. I think that this year we're going to see a huge Indiana Fever surge that's going to lead the way for championship in either like 2028 or 2029. That's how I see it.
I guess we'll see. You have DeWanna Bonner, Kelsey Mitchell, Sydney Colson, Natasha Howard, and 2 arguably generational talents in Aaliyah Boston and Caitlin Clark. Caitlin Clark learned the WNBA game quick. She learned it quick. She is not as great of a driver as Sky, but as far as true ones who can facilitate, she's about as good as anyone else. And she shoots the ball better than Skylar.
I do think that on that level she is better, but I do believe that 2 things, the experience and the physicality. I do know that Caitlin Clark has been hitting the gym this off season. She has no way to go but up, and it's gonna get scary. She's gonna be so good that we're gonna be like, I'm very excited. I think that
Too much
it's
credit.
gonna take one more season.
I'm not saying they're gonna win, but I do think they are ahead of the Seattle Storm. And Stephanie White is also a huge piece of that. I didn't even get into that, but again, I talked about it with Brian. Stephanie White's a better coach than Noe right now.
Oh, Stephanie White, yeah, she has, no, for sure.
So
I don't know. I think that
guess we'll see. That's why
depending on who
games.
the storm brings for that shoe position,
Yeah,
I think that's going to make a big difference. I think one of the main, I mean, I know that they brought Sophie Cunningham and they have Lexi Hall, Damiris. They do have depth. I think that the main obstacle for the Fever is that they are too young. That's how I see it.
I'm not saying they're going to win a title. I don't think Indiana wins a title. If I'm taking Seattle or Indiana to be as of right now, and I don't make predictions, you can, all of my Gotta Get Up listeners know this because I was asked multiple times and I said, I'm not doing that. I feel confident saying right now, and I don't do this very often, I take this Indiana team as of right now over the Seattle team. And I don't think it matters who you bring at the two. Watch those 1v1 games. I've seen it in the flesh. I told y'all I was live messaging in Slack. I saw how cold she was in that opening game. I don't doubt Sky, and her shot has been there for Unrivaled. It wasn't always there in the last WNBA season. We talked about that earlier on the show. That being said, this is not a Sky versus Caitlin thing. It's a collection, an amalgamation, right? The sum of all the parts.
Team combination, or not? It's not Sky versus Caitlin Clark.
Sky
it's about
lethal. And if she's feeling it, I love that. I'm not saying Seattle finishes 8. I mean, these two teams might be neck and neck in the standings. Right now, I give it to Indiana. I love Stephanie White.
Oh, I love her. I think
she's going to be in her element. DeWanna Bonner, if DeWanna Bonner brings what she brought, like that first 2 seasons to Connecticut, to Indiana, that's nasty. That's nasty work. Absolutely filthy. And DeWanna Bonner is on a personal mission to be one of the best to ever play in the WNBA. And her numbers are already there. I think what she's feeling is that she's maybe not in the conversation as the person. And she still won't be if Indiana wins while DeWanna Bonner is on this team. I think she'd have to have like gaudy numbers for anyone to talk about DeWanna Bonner bringing home the title, because everyone's going to talk about Caitlin Clark. Everyone's going to talk about Aaliyah Boston. That's just how it's going to go. But on this team, you mean to tell me Caitlin Clark is going to have the option to pass to Aaliyah Boston, Natasha Howard, and DeWanna Bonner? That's disgusting.
It is a hell of a thing. It is. Yeah.
That's filthy. Now, to the youth part of it, and can they close out games? Because obviously DeWanna Bonner in Connecticut could not do that. And they had Alyssa Thomas. They had Bree Jones, so, they have to play the games. But that immediately puts Indiana in a category that they were not in and have not been in for a really long time.
Yeah,
and
I think
Seattle is still a team. Seattle is still a team where, again, we talked about on this episode, the culture is very much still being built. And how much is the residual of the absence of Lloyd, the coach, the inquiry into coaching, like how much does that impact the team? We don't know that yet. But if I had to pick now, I'm taking Indiana. And I don't even listen, y'all. If y'all know, that's all I'm gonna say. I'll take Indiana, and it's not because there's no favorites between these two. I'm just telling you from a basketball perspective. That's
I wouldn't be surprised if they, cut everyone off guard. I'm gonna say I don't think it's impossible for them to win this season. I don't think so. I think that the WNBA the way that things have shifted in the league, the way that pieces were moved around, like Atlanta is going to be a really good team this year. It's going to team. I think it's going to be the most competitive WNBA season in the past years. The way things have been moving, the way teams have been shifting, the way players have been going from one team to another, it's going to be very competitive. And I want to be honest and say I can make a prediction right now. I really can't. It's very hard for me to be able to, I know that, the New York Liberty, I think they have some stuff but I feel like Stewie needs to find her groove back for the Liberty to continue the same level they were last year. I do think Minnesota is going to continue as I think Minnesota is going to be the top contender this year. They're going to be the team to be beat. That's one prediction that I feel comfortable with making. Vegas, they are going to have to figure some stuff out too. I feel like it's going to be one of the most balanced seasons that we have seen and that we're going to see in the WNBA.
Yeah, I mean, I said it last year. Minnesota was hella scary. Moni saying, "I'm hoping for a Minnesota Lynx type season for the Storm, coast under the radar while winning a bunch of games." I mean, and that's my point though. Seattle has to prove it. Indiana had that; they had the momentum, and now they have a coach that I think can really bring them to the next level. So, yeah. Indiana's going to be scary. Minnesota is playing pissed off. I got pissed off on our Gotta Get Up episode. Like they want revenge. I was like, okay, you lost. I don't know. I guess if you feel you need to avenge yourself, go for it. But I was like, I don't know. Y'all lost. So
we're talking about Cheryl Reeve with there's an expression in Portuguese that sangue nos olhos, which like blood in your eyes, which is like when you're hungry for something and you're like you have your sight set on something. So I feel like Shadow Reeve is coming with like sangue nos olhos.
I think
because that's like it's a motivation. It's a determination that is kind of motivated by anger.
Yeah.
Anger.
Yeah. I mean, Cheryl Reeve is clearly upset. But I don't know.
Yeah.
I'm a New Yorker at heart, grew up a Liberty fan. So I'm like, okay, well, you do what you got to do, boo. Either way, that banner is going up on May 17th. So, or 16th. I think it's 17th or this. I keep forgetting. Anyway, that banner is going up first home game of the season. Either way, so
it's gonna be fun. Yeah.
Either way, it's going up. All right. Seeing no extra questions or comments, we're gonna lock this one up here. Thank you as always for joining us for Tempestagi Talk. Erica L. Ayala here with Roberta Rodriguez. We do know that our next episode will focus on Mercedes Russell. Again, that Sparks team, interesting. I don't know what to make of them just yet, but they're interesting. So, we'll see what they've got cooking, but that is going to be on Thursday, February 26th. And we will get back to you. It'll probably be around the same time, 6:30 Pacific time. But yeah, we will have that. And Jalen Sherrod is going to be our next episode of Gotta Get Up, a podcast for New York Liberty fans. That will be on February 17th, 7:30 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, right here on Black Rosie Media YouTube. And don't forget, please, please, please subscribe to our newsletters. It's 100% free for you, but helps us make a case to sponsors as we continue to build this community. We will be talking about Unrivaled. We will be talking about Athletes Unlimited. We will be talking about NCAA for the next
Ooh.
digest that will come to your inbox tomorrow, Thursday. So make sure you check that out. And for those who celebrate, I mean, certain holidays, I think obviously are just commercialized, but this, of course, for a lot of people is a reminder to spread love. It is the Brooklyn way, although this is Tempestaci talking, not gotta get up, but spread love. Whether that's love for your colleagues, you've got to have at least some colleagues that you want to show some love and appreciation for your friends, certainly for your family and loved ones, including some of your fur babies. Spread love. This is a great week to do that. And we love and appreciate you for joining us here on Black Rosie Media. Until the next episode, everyone, we will catch you later. Have a great night. Enjoy Unrivaled.
Good night, everyone.
A good matchup between USC, UCLA tomorrow as well. Yeah. Lauren Betts is having one heck of a season. So Lauren Betts versus Juju Watkins. Don't want to miss that. And again, we'll have you covered in the next digest of Women's Basketball Roundup. For Roberta Rodriguez, I am Erica L. Ayala, wishing you a good night.